My ex-wife belittled my life at her wedding, but her new partner's face changed everything. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I thought I owed it to closure. Maybe I was still tethered to some adolescent idea of taking the high road, of showing up and smiling through the wreckage like a man who had matured, transcended. Maybe I just didn't want her to think I was bitter, but I was bitter. I was bitter in that quiet, unnameable way that seeps into your bones, the kind that doesn't show itself in rage, but in how you leave texts unanswered and how your laugh sounds just a little too tight. The invitation came on a Wednesday, I remember, late afternoon. The mail was damp from the rain, and I almost threw the stack on the kitchen counter without looking. I was standing there with the fridge door open, looking at the same half carton of eggs and expired hummus, and I saw my name written in cursive, thick paper too thick like it had something to prove. I knew it was from her before I even opened it, my name in her handwriting like a trick of the eye or a ghost. I don't know why she didn't type it. Or maybe that made it worse, the familiarity of the strokes, like she'd rehearsed them. It was white and gold and clean and cold. Her name beside his, Matthew C. Holbrook, a name I'd never spoken aloud until then. My mouth resisted it, Holbrook, like something heavy in the throat. I stared at the RSVP card for a long time, turning it over like it might contain a map or a reason. We'd love to celebrate with you, the audacity of that. We celebrate with me, I laughed out loud just once, the kind of laugh that punches you in the gut as it leaves. I didn't RSVP for a week, just left it on the windowsill above the sink, weighed down by an old paperweight Claire had given me for my 32nd birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. A glass orb full of tiny bubbles frozen midair. She said it reminded her of me, calm under pressure. I think I thought it was romantic at the time. The day of the wedding, I dressed slowly, like each button was a decision I had to relitigate. I wore the navy suit she once said made me look like I knew what I was doing. That was the year we went to Boston in the fall, and I surprised her with tickets to the symphony. She cried during the second movement and told me she felt safe. Now I looked in the mirror and saw a man wearing a suit like armor, hoping it would hold everything in. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with the cuffs. I drove with the windows down even though it was cold. I told myself it was to keep me alert, but really I needed the wind to slap something awake in me. The vineyard was about 45 minutes out of the city, nestled in that part of the countryside where things look curated but not too curated. Rustic meets elegance. A Pinterest dream, Claire's style through and through. There were white folding chairs set up in neat rows, strings of Edison bulbs hanging overhead like memories suspended mid-sentence. The sky was too perfect, cloudless, curated fake. Everything felt like a stage, and I was walking onto it like an understudy in the wrong play. I tried to keep to the edges. I recognized some people from our old life, couples we double-dated with, friends who'd chosen her in the divorce like it was a custody battle. There were polite smiles, those nods that last just a second too long, people not sure if they should say something or pretend not to notice the ghost in the back row. No one said anything, not really. The ceremony was brief, efficient. The efficient used phrases like second chances and choosing love, and I felt a vain pulse in my temple. Claire looked beautiful, of course. She always did. She had that way of commanding a room without trying. The dress was simple, elegant, lace detailing on the shoulders, her hair swept back into that intentionally messy bun that made her look like a French film actress. I hated that I still noticed. She didn't look at me once. But I watched her the whole time, and not out of longing. It was something else, something quieter. Like looking at a photo of yourself from years ago and realizing you don't recognize the person, even though you wore that shirt, even though you remember how you felt that day. It's a peculiar kind of dissonance, being familiar with a stranger. Then came the speeches. I wasn't prepared for that. Claire took the mic and smiled in that way she does, big but not all the way to the eyes. She started talking about love, about growth, about the long, winding road that brought her here. I knew she meant me. Every word was a scalpel. She told a story about how some people can't dream beyond the life in front of them, and the room laughed. She looked around, smiling, proud of the line. I used to think playing it safe was noble. Now I know it was fear dressed up as responsibility. I felt it then, the cold, creeping heat of humiliation. I looked down at my drink, hands clenched around the glass like a lifeline. Her voice filled the air like perfume, sweet and toxic. Sometimes, she said, we have to walk away from comfort to find joy. I don't know if anyone else noticed that she wasn't really talking about love. She was talking about me, about how I'd failed to be something she needed, about how I'd been small, contained, predictable. But what she called small, I called steady. What she called fear, I called showing up. Every goddamn day, I cooked. I held her when she had panic attacks. I stayed up with her mother in hospice. I believed in things slowly. I built a life brick by brick, and I would have stayed. I would have kept building. She didn't want a builder. She wanted a spark. I left before dessert, before dancing, before the part where people pretend they don't know what's been lost to celebrate what's been found. I walked past the vineyard into the field behind the main house where the lights faded and the grass grew wild and unsupervised. I stood there for a long time, breathing hard like I'd run a race I didn't remember starting. The sky above me was huge and empty, and I felt so small, but not in the way Claire meant. Not small as in insignificant, small as in contained within myself, holding my own shape, finally. And that's when I felt it, that break, a shift, not loud, not dramatic, just something inside that quietly unlatched, like a door closing behind me. I didn't cry, I thought I might, but all I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet you get after a storm, not peace exactly, but the start of it, the space for it. I drove home in silence, no music, just the hum of the tires and the thudding of something old finally falling still. The thing no one tells you about the aftermath is how quiet it is. Not the kind of quiet you get in nature or early morning kitchens. No, it's more like the quiet inside your own body after something's gone terribly wrong. A silence that thrums, that stings. I got home that night and just stood in the doorway, keys still in my hand, staring at the mess I hadn't noticed until right then. Dishes in the sink, a pile of unopened mail on the floor. A coat half fallen off the hook like it had tried to leave and changed its mind. I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my keys on the counter and sat down on the couch in the dark. The silence grew teeth. It filled the space between my ribs and pressed against the backs of my eyes, but nothing came. No tears, no anger, just this weird, echoing numbness. Like my body had decided it wasn't safe to feel anything at all. That night I slept on top of the covers in my suit like some idiot in a sad movie. I woke up at 4:17 a.m. with the taste of copper in my mouth and the feeling that I'd forgotten something important. It took me a minute to remember that the forgetting was the important thing, that my ex-wife had spoken about me like I was a pair of shoes she finally threw out. That I'd been there, standing in the back like a museum exhibit, watching the life I'd tried to build get laughed out of a vineyard. I called in sick the next day, and the next. I didn't say why, I just emailed my manager and said I needed a few days. Family matters, I typed, hit send. It felt dishonest, but I couldn't bring myself to write. My ex-wife humiliated me in front of 50 people, and now I can't look in the mirror without feeling like a cartoon version of a man I used to be. So I stopped pretending for a while, ate toast, mostly stale, drank black coffee that made my stomach feel like it was being eaten from the inside. Let the garbage pile up because taking it out would mean going outside, and outside meant faces, sounds, effort. It felt like my entire nervous system had gone on strike. I kept the TV on in the background just to have voices in the apartment, even if they were fake. Game shows, cooking competitions, sitcom reruns I didn't laugh at. At night, I lay in bed and replayed her voice, that damn speech, the smugness in it, like she was proud of growing out of me, like I was some outdated idea she'd survived. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I was. Toward the end, Claire had a way of looking past me when she talked, like she was rehearsing lines for someone else. I'd ask how her day was and she'd give me 3 words, then silence. I'd cook dinner and she'd pick at it like the food offended her. She started staying later at work, going to industry mixers, started using words like alignment and visioning. I didn't speak that language. I spoke grocery lists and back rubs and how was your sleep. I thought that would be enough. After about a week of drifting, I started walking. At night mostly, hoodie up, headphones in, no music. Just something about the shape of the routine that made me feel tethered to the world. I'd walk for hours, block after block, past glowing apartment windows full of people with better lighting and better lives. I'd make up stories about them, teachers, artists, couples who still laughed when they brushed teeth together. Sometimes I'd end up outside places we used to go, Claire and me, the bookstore where she bought that awful poetry collection she never finished, the Italian place where we got into our first real fight. I remember her pushing her food around and saying, "Do you ever want more than this?" And I thought she meant the ravioli. Oh, she didn't. The walking didn't fix anything, but it helped, just the rhythm of it, the repetition. I started noticing little things, the way the wind felt different near the river, how the bakery on 11th started baking bread around midnight, the way my feet kept going even when my mind felt like quicksand. And then there was the cafe. It was this small, tucked-away place with no sign, just a window full of plants and a chalkboard out front that always had some poetic nonsense scribbled on it. You are not a burden just because you break slowly. Stuff like that. I only went in because I couldn't handle another night of my own walls pressing in. That's when I met her, Anna. She had ink on her hands and a chipped mug in front of her, wiping down the counter like she was deep in conversation with it. She looked up when I walked in and smiled, not that fake customer service smile, but something looser, unbothered. Her sweater had a hole near the elbow and her hair was up in a messy bun, the kind that didn't try to impress anyone. I ordered tea. I don't even like tea. I think I just wanted to say something. Rough night, she asked, not unkindly. Rough year, I replied before I could stop myself. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Try the chamomile on the house. I sat in the back with my hands around the mug like it was something holy. I didn't say much. Neither did she, but there was a comfort in the silence, a different kind than the one I'd been drowning in. This was the kind that made space instead of taking it away. I started going there more often. Every few nights at first, then it became routine. She never pried, just gave me that same nod when I walked in, poured the tea, wiped down the counter. Occasionally we'd talk, nothing deep, music, books, how people forget their umbrellas when it rains, but there was something steady in it. Something that didn't ask me to be anything other than quietly broken. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was something. And in that something, I started to feel human again, just barely. I didn't forget Claire's words. I still heard them some nights, small life, held back fear dressed up as responsibility like a looped recording, but they didn't sting the same way. They started to sound less like truth and more like projection. A woman convincing herself that discarding me was a brave act, that she wasn't running, that she wasn't still afraid. And maybe she was, maybe we both were. But at least I was learning how to sit still in the fear, let it move through me, let it settle. There's a strange kind of strength in admitting you're lost, not pretending anymore, just saying I don't know where I'm going, but I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm still walking. I'm still trying. It was a Tuesday, one of those gray, shapeless days that sits in the middle of a week like it's forgotten what it's supposed to be. I'd gotten used to the blur by then. My life had become a soft repetition of tea at the cafe, walks at night, sleep that came in jagged bursts. Some days I'd write just a line or two in a notebook I never let anyone see, nothing profound, just fragments, half-thoughts. A sentence like, I used to know what I tasted like when I cried. Or what if I was never hard to love, just inconvenient? I didn't know what I was trying to say, I just needed to say something. That Tuesday I was sitting in the cafe near the back window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. It felt cinematic, like my life had become a small art house film that no one would finish. Anna was behind the counter humming to herself. She always hummed, softly like she was keeping rhythm with her own breath. I liked that about her. She never asked me to explain myself. She just noticed without intruding. And then he walked in. I didn't see him at first. Just heard the chime of the door, then that voice, smooth, overconfident, too loud for the space. Hey, sorry, do you guys have matcha? I turned my head and froze. It was him. Claire's husband, Matthew Holbrook. He looked exactly like he had at the wedding, polished, expensive, unbothered. His coat was some kind of high-end wool, dark gray with sharp shoulders, like he'd walked out of a magazine spread about men who win arguments by smiling. He scanned the room like he expected to be recognized, like the world should tilt slightly in his favor. Anna's body changed the second she saw him. Not her face stayed calm, but her shoulders tensed, and her hand, which had been steady a moment before, now trembled slightly as she wiped down a mug that didn't need wiping. He didn't notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. That felt more likely. Matcha, he asked again a little sharper. Anna looked at him, then at me, then back to him. Yeah, we have it, she said finally, her voice quiet. He ordered it to go. While he waited, he leaned against the counter, scrolling his phone, smirking at something he read. He didn't look at me, but I watched him. My pulse was slow, but my jaw was clenched, not in anger, something else, a tightening, a bracing. He took the cup with a distracted thanks and walked out. The door closed, the chime faded. The quiet came back, but it wasn't the same. Anna stood frozen behind the counter, one hand on the register, eyes fixed on the door like she was waiting for it to open again. "Do you know him?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She didn't look at me when she said it. "Yeah, I used to work with him at Larch and Moore years ago." Her voice was flat. I waited. She didn't offer anything more, so I asked, "Was he like that then?" She blinked, her eyes shifted toward mine, and I saw it, something old and unsettled rising up through the calm. "He's charming," she said, "in the way that makes you second guess every time he makes you feel small." I didn't speak, I let the words sit. "There were stories," she added, "not official, but the kind women whisper to each other in bathrooms, about how he'd flirt until he got bored, how he'd gaslight you if you spoke up, made you feel crazy for expecting anything real. He once told a friend of mine that emotional women were occupational hazards." I felt a slow, sick turn in my stomach. Not rage, not yet, just this sinking, hollow recognition. A puzzle piece sliding into place, all the things Claire had said, the way she'd spoken at the wedding, the bravado, the edge, the need to rewrite history in front of an audience. It wasn't love. It was performance. She was performing for him, or maybe because of him. Because he needed someone next to him who would laugh at pain and call it freedom. I stood up and walked out into the rain without saying goodbye. I needed the cold, I needed to feel it. As I walked, everything came rushing back. The wedding, her speech, that line, "Some people can't dream beyond the life in front of them." I'd carried that line like a stone in my chest for weeks. Let it rot something tender in me, but now I saw it for what it was. Not truth. Defense. She hadn't outgrown me, she'd run. Run from stability, from reflection, from anything that made her sit still long enough to confront herself. And I'd let her define me on the way out. I sat down on a bench in the park, soaking wet, and said it out loud just once like a spell breaking. I wasn't the one holding her back. The words didn't echo, they didn't even feel dramatic, just real, just mine. I thought back to our last fight before she left. She said, "You never make bold choices." And I'd told her, "I choose you every day, isn't that bold enough?" Oh, she hadn't answered. But now, years later, I finally had the answer for myself. It was bold, choosing someone day after day without conditions. That's the bravest thing I've ever done. She wanted a spark. But I was a flame. Steady, warm, honest. She didn't want that. Or maybe she didn't know how to hold it. Either way, it's not my failure anymore. I walked home slowly, the rain letting up, streetlights flickering into amber puddles. I felt something loosen in my chest, not peace, not yet, but air, room, a small clearing inside me where grief had once squatted. That night I lit a candle, just one, sat at my kitchen table and opened my notebook. And for the first time in a long while, I wrote something I believed. I am not what she said I was. And it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. No moment of light breaking through clouds, no musical montage of healing, just a slow rearranging, grief giving up its favorite seat, silence turning from enemy to companion, and me waking up one morning and realizing I stopped replaying her voice in my head. It was subtle, like the way snow melts. You don't notice it until the ground is wet and the branches are bare again. I stopped walking past the old places, not out of avoidance, but because I didn't need to anymore. I didn't need the pain to prove anything to me. I'd wrung it dry. Now I took different routes. I noticed the hardware store with the hand-painted sign, the mural on the brick wall near the fire station. I started noticing my own breath again. That was new. Anna was still around. We never defined anything, and maybe that's why it worked. We were two people who had been hurt quietly and badly, sitting near each other in the wreckage, not trying to build a monument out of it, just passing each other small things: tea, warmth, a shared song, the occasional long look that asked you to, and got a quiet nod in response. One night, months later, I helped her carry out the trash behind the cafe. It was snowing lightly, the kind of snow that disappears as soon as it lands. We stood there for a moment, our breath puffing out like dialogue in a foreign film. She looked at me and said, "You seem less haunted." And I felt it too. I hadn't touched the wedding invitation since that night, but one evening I pulled it from the drawer where I'd stashed it and burned it on the stove. Not dramatically, not as some ritual, just it was time. The paper curled inward, blackened, collapsed in on itself like a memory folding back into the void it came from. I watched it go with something close to tenderness, like watching an old friend walk away. I started writing again, for real this time. Not just fragments, whole thoughts, pages. I wrote about failure, about shame, about love that wears sweatpants and scrubs toilets and doesn't always say the right thing. I wrote about my father and how I never asked him the questions I should have. I wrote about Claire too, but not to blame her. I wrote to understand her. And then I stopped writing about her. I painted the hallway, a soft green like sea glass, not because it meant anything deep, I just liked it. I bought a new set of dishes. I stopped pretending I was going to learn to cook and leaned into being a takeout and toast kind of guy. I cleaned out my closet and found her old sweater shoved in the back. I held it for a minute, pressed it to my face, and then tossed it in the donation pile. Not out of spite, just because I didn't need it anymore. I still have bad days. I still wake up sometimes with that dull ache in my chest, like my body remembers pain before my mind catches up. But I know now that healing isn't linear, it's circular, spiral-shaped. Some days you revisit an old wound, some days it revisits you, but you get stronger. You learn how to hold it differently. There was a day, maybe 6 months after the wedding, when I saw a couple on the subway. They were probably in their 60s. She rested her head on his shoulder while he scrolled through his phone, and she didn't say anything, just closed her eyes, trusting the motion of the train and the warmth of his arm. I watched them and didn't feel envy, I just felt softness. Like maybe I could get there one day, if not with someone else, then with myself. Because that's the part no one talks about. That coming back to yourself is the real work, falling in love with your own damn quiet, your own company, sitting at your own table and knowing that even if no one else walks through the door, it's still dinner, it's still life. Anna and I never talked about the man again. I think we both understood that some people don't deserve a place in the story anymore. Some chapters end without a final word. Some ghosts fade without needing to be exorcised. One morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't wince. That was a good day. My beard was uneven, my eyes looked tired, but there was something steady in the way I looked back at myself. I smiled, not big, not triumphant, just enough. That night, I wrote a line that stayed with me. There's no applause for rebuilding, just dust and breath and the quiet satisfaction of standing up. That's where I live now, in the quiet, in the standing up. In the slow, stubborn, ordinary act of making a life I can live in, not perfect, not poetic, just mine. And that's enough. Oh, it really is.